Hello friends, for today's video we are finally in season 3 of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and we're going to be looking at episodes 1 through 5. Typically, if you've been keeping up with the series, you probably know this. I go in order of the episodes and I take notes while watching and then let you know what I was thinking as I was consuming those moments of the show. And for today, I actually want to structure this a little bit differently because I have a lot of thoughts, but a lot of my thoughts are looking back at some of what we've seen before and comparing some of those things. And I do have some negative feelings about one episode in particular. I'm very curious to know if this is a fan favorite or if there is a lot of controversy among the fandom about this episode and there's a big divide, a great divide perhaps, about the beach episode. So I actually want to start by talking about that episode, as a lot of times before I get into specifics, I do like to give general thoughts and I do like to kind of look back and compare. And this episode sort of facilitates that, just given how it goes about. And I also don't want to end on a negative, so I'm going to talk about the beach episode first, and then we'll get into the other episodes. So I also want to talk about the fact that now that we're in the final season, I have noticed, and it's just my opinion, so maybe other people feel differently, but I do feel like each season starts with a bang. You have some really, really good opening episodes, and then the episode 3 through 5 mark tends to have a weak one within it, or maybe a couple weak ones, and then it feels like everything goes up from there. So I do want to preface my negative thoughts for episode 5 of this season with the same statement that I think moving forward, things will hopefully be going up from here. And I really liked the first couple episodes that we have, and we'll get into that in a second. But episode 5, I actually delayed talking about this batch of episodes because I was wrestling with how to go about this. I think this episode by no means is filler. If you need a refresher, the beach episode is when you see Zuko and Azula and Ty Lee and May, the one that's grumpy and like has the typical anime run. See this little quartet go basically have a vacation at the family beach house. They play sports and they go to a party and they pretend they're not who they are so they can see how they would be treated if people didn't know how important of figures they were. And then they have sort of this tell-all around the campfire. And then Aang and gang are being pursued by the person that basically shoots fire out of his mind, I guess you could say. He doesn't seem to bend the same way as other people do. And that's the general overview of that episode. So there's the refresher. I, by no means, this is where I was going before, I think this is a filler episode because there are very important things that occur both plot-wise, because we could not skip over this if you want to know the introduction of how that character that's pursuing Aang and all of them. I'm assuming that this character is going to continue to pursue them moving forward. Maybe at some point this character will even capture some of them, and it wouldn't make any sense if you skip this episode and then later on that person showed up and the character seemed familiar with them. So I understand that there's an important antagonistic being in this episode, but that's not even the most important part. The really important part is Zuko and the revelation and the finally admitting to himself that he is not happy. He thought that this would be the path that he was meant to finally restore his honor with, and he also is recognizing he doesn't really seem to know what to do anymore. He doesn't know right from wrong. He now also doesn't have Iroh or any kind of parental or mentor-like figure to guide him. And when he's having to try to decide everything for himself, when he doesn't have something to go up against, all he has to do is go up against himself, and it's becoming explosive. He is acting out against those that he's supposed to care about. He's trying to act normal, but he can't act normal because there's all this internal struggle. I thought that conceptually, that was great. I've been waiting for a moment like this from him, and I actually even wrote, and this is where some of my frustrations are going to come. In the first episode, I think they conveyed that remorse, regret, confusion. I should be happy, so I should be proud of myself. Why don't I feel proud of myself? Why do I have these other feelings? Why does it feel like there's constantly this war inside me? I feel like they conveyed that all with a single look. When he comes out before the crowd, I wrote in my notes, I've put Zuko, he realizes he feels none of what he expected. And I really think that they showed that through their animators. I think they showed that with just that single expression on his face, and they've done that in the moments that we've seen him since then, that grappling with what he's done, but also feeling like he's trying to fulfill this role that he thinks he's supposed to have for himself. And you've seen throughout the show this commentary about destiny, if it's placed before him by someone else, what he chooses for himself. All of those things have been phenomenal. So I'm not upset that all of that was done in episode 5. I just despise the context with which this came forward, because, as I just said, I feel like they conveyed all of that with a look. And I felt like all of season 2 was very nuanced. I think that the show has trusted its audience and done a fantastic job, especially with the fact that the target demographic typically is a younger audience. So usually you see things are way less subtle when you have a younger audience. And they have somehow managed to make it where it is subtle, it is nuanced, and it balances out how adults would go to the show, how they would come to the table, and how children would come to the table watching the show, and then, you know, people in age groups in between. And I thought that they've done such a good job, and I've been so impressed with it. And it felt like they no longer trusted the viewer to discern based off of context. It didn't feel like they trusted us anymore. It felt like they really felt the need to not only hold our hand, but then walk us all the way to the conclusion. And they did that for every single one of the characters in that little campfire scene. And it was like, no, don't. I don't mind if there's this tell-all. This is what I had to deal with growing up. And this is what happened with my siblings. This is what happened with my parent. This is what happened in my past. I don't mind scenes like that, because there are times in life where people just come together and they reveal a lot of themselves to someone else. And it can be a really trust-building moment for a lot of individuals. And I think also in a situation like this, I think a lot of us have memories of there being some kind of like youth camp that we go to, or something where we're suddenly removed from our usual day-to-day lives, and then that's when we're able to express a lot more. So in that sense, I think it's relatable, both if you are an adult looking back at your past, it can be relatable to you as an adult now, and then if you're a teen watching that moment, it can be really powerful because it can feel like you resonate really strongly with what's happening, plus it does further the internal character development, and it makes it a little bit more obvious. So I'm not opposed to that either. It's just, it went basically like, okay, we're going to have each character not only express their past and their backstory, but then we're going to have them all literally tell you, so that's why you do this, this, and this. This with your mother is why you started acting like this. And then Ty Lee with her, oh, you might think I'm a circus freak, but I like standing out because I have 6 beautiful sisters and we all kind of look alike. And then Azula has to be apparently the therapist of the group, where she's like, okay, let me diagnose for you from this one little snippet of information about your past exactly who you are, so the viewer knows exactly who you are, and then we can not worry about having a nuanced take on any of you, and we can just move forward. And I was like, oh, I think about the entire last season, how we were developing Zuko and how we were hinting at things, and I just really did not like it all being like, hey viewer, in case you missed it, here's how Zuko feels. I'm like, I know how he feels. I know because of the brilliance of the subtlety that your animators have done, that the dialogue has, he says one thing but he means another, or there's some kind of conflict going on between what he's saying but the tone of his voice, or when he's talking to Iroh, there's conflict there, and you're like, okay, I don't think he actually has figured out how he truly feels, and he keeps pursuing. I feel like so many of us can piece that together. I really didn't care for how much it no longer seemed like they trusted the viewer to figure things out. Anyway, I have a prediction, as always, because this is my first time watching. Don't tell me if I'm right or wrong. I just think that it's fun to let people know my predictions so that if you are somebody who's familiar with the show, if I'm totally off base, you can laugh at me, basically. And then I can look back and be like, oh, wow, I was completely wrong about that. So I'm going to reveal, based off of what they've shown us in this episode, my predictions of Azula's character. I have found that thus far, Azula is constantly trying to dominate. She's trying to show herself as the authority. And I think it's rooted in, you see that scene in the Zuko Alone episode where it goes to his past and you get the flashbacks, that you see her very eagerly awaiting her opportunity to show off to her higher-ups, her authority figures. And she's just wanting to impress all the time. And she's been successful at that. She has impressed. She has been given the ability to go around and pursue and do everything she can to assert her dominance over other people. And she's been very successful at it, as we saw at the end of last season. What we haven't been able to see is anybody ever choose her for her. And I might end up at some point in talking about this theory, say pick me, but I don't mean it in the way that nowadays we talk about pick me girls or pick me boys or anything like that. I don't mean it like that. I mean that it feels like maybe deep down desires to be seen, to be picked, to be cared for simply because of who she is, not because of what she can bring to the table. Which, given the dynamic and the way in which we've seen the trauma inflicted on Zuko from their father, I imagine that it has had an effect on her as well, where she's constantly felt like she needs to impress their father and that she needs to be this person who shuts off her emotions, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. Thus, she deep down just really wants somebody to see her and care about her and choose her. So, in that scene where she's talking to Ty Lee, who's just so effortlessly able to get all these boys to be into her, basically. And she tells Ty Lee, to be honest, I'm a little jealous of you. I don't think Azula's like, I wish boys also were able to stand in the sunlight to block it from me while I'm suntanning or whatever. I don't think that's what she desires. I think she desires somebody to see her because in this moment, it is not known who she is. She wants somebody to see her, be interested in her, want to get to know her, and that finally that person that's inside, underneath all of this hard exterior, that person can finally be seen, that person can finally exist, and she doesn't have to put on this false front all the time. And I think currently she's feeling somewhat comfortable because Zuko, in her mind, this is my guess, I don't know this for a fact, of course, I think in her mind, she thinks Zuko chose me. Zuko chose me over Uncle. I don't think she thinks Zuko is also struggling to, I don't think she cares about any of that. I think there is a part of her that feels good because Zuko chose her. But I think my prediction is that Zuko is eventually going to turn his back on what his father wants for them. I think he's eventually going to ally himself with Aang and all of them because of, I feel like, all of the foreshadowing that I think has happened thus far as saying these paths are going to come together. And when he does that, I think she's going to see that as the ultimate betrayal because the one person, her brother, who finally chose her and her side, now is choosing someone else once again, and a person who's been deemed as their great enemy for pretty much their entire lives. I think it's going to just make her go mad, basically. So her in that campfire scene, part of what really put this theory in my mind is when they're talking and she's like, well, Mother always liked Zuko better and always chose Zuko. And then she says something like, because she thought I was a monster. She's like, she's not wrong. And then she says something along the lines of, it doesn't mean it didn't hurt though. But she's brushing it off like it didn't hurt. Her tone of voice is saying it didn't hurt. I think it did hurt. And I think that she's at odds because one parent encouraged the monster, but then the other parent was disgusted with that. But she didn't know how to get this other parent to see the better side without feeling like she had to behave like two different people. Plus, she feels like that one already chose Zuko, so her only option was to appeal to their dad. That's my prediction for her. And maybe I'm completely off base. Maybe I'm totally wrong. But just the way in which she articulated herself and behaved in that episode was so strange. And I want to be clear, I don't think they humanized her. Because humanizing her, for me at least, and you can completely disagree, I'm not saying you're wrong if you feel differently, but I wouldn't say I think this episode humanized her, because humanizing her for me would have been taking a peek at, pulling the curtain back and seeing a little bit more of her relationship with her father, because we have yet to see it. Besides just that tiny little flashback moment in the last season, we really haven't seen her interactions with her father at all. And we also don't really hear her speak of him the same way that Zuko would speak of him. So because we have yet to see that, I feel like we have yet to really understand these deeper parts of who she is and why she behaves the way she does. And I want to see that. I told my husband that I don't feel this episode humanized her because I don't actually think, again, I don't think she's actually like, I struggle like every other teen with wanting to be liked by people and wanting people to think I'm pretty and whatever. I don't think that's actually what she's feeling, hence why I don't really feel like it's actually humanizing her necessarily. I think it's hinting at something, and I'm hoping we dissect that and we peel it back and we get to see a little bit more. But anyway, the thing I told my husband is I'm like, this humanized her as much as politicians eating ice cream humanizes politicians. Like, you know how every time that you see a politician be like, I'm gonna go to just a regular old mom and pop ice cream parlor and I'm gonna get some like slightly different flavor because like I'm just a regular old person just like my voter base, and you're just like, don't do that. We all know that you're just trying to appear a certain way, so just stop. It's very false and it's just kind of cringy. So anyway, I feel like that's how I felt. If that's all this actually was, if it really is not all the depth that I am hoping it is, which I can't say for sure if it is that, if it's none of those things and it truly was just, look, she's just like everyone else, then I really don't like it. But I'm hoping it's not that. I'm really hoping it's not that. Anyway, maybe I wasn't as negative on this episode as I thought it was. I thought I was. I in talking about it, I think I'm holding out for I just don't know because I haven't gotten to later. So maybe all of you are like, just hold on. Maybe you'll like this episode more in hindsight. I will say though, the just general vibe of them playing sports at the beach and this one kid's like, don't tell my dad that I'm throwing a party. All that stuff, I just wasn't a fan of it. So I didn't like the general setup. I still think Tylee and May, I have thought they were kind of empty until now, and then they sort of gave us more context about them, but I didn't think it really enhanced those characters. In fact, now I just think Tylee is really kind of dumb. I mean, your friend is standing in front of you who you know was severely abused by his father, burned by his father, humiliated in front of a ton of people, exiled essentially. And you're over here being like, it's really hard when you have 6 beautiful sisters. I'm just like, listen to what you're saying right now and who you're saying it to. I'm not saying you can't feel like you have your own problems and that there were certain things. And Zuko was being mean to her in that moment. I just think she sounds so oblivious, and it was furthered by the fact that when she's like, this negative energy is not good for the skin, and Zuko's like, you think I care about my skin? And she's like, oh yeah. And I suppose in a sense it's kind of realistic, because I think a lot of us have encountered those people before, where you'll be speaking about the atrocities of the world or some extreme level of trauma, or a book you read, a memoir where somebody's going through something and they're like, well, that's kind of like how for me, and then they talk about something that's, I don't want to compare bad things that have happened in people's lives, but I'm like, Tylee, I mean, it's not the same. And I think maybe in a sense that's very relatable too. So there's like this dichotomy of, on one hand, I feel like this episode did things that was really brilliant, and on the other hand, I hated certain things they did. So I don't know. I feel very conflicted about this episode. But I know that I'll read to you my notes, okay, while I was watching, because I don't know, maybe you'll be amused. On further reflection, I definitely think I by no means can say I appreciate this episode just yet, but I think I can give a little more credit to it. While watching it, though, I hated it, so just know that these initial thoughts were initial thoughts, and then I thought a little bit more. Literally, as soon as it started, I wrote, ugh. And then I wrote, Fire Nation old lady eyebrows are quite intense. They don't really have eyebrows, they just have, like, bones that seem to protrude a bit in this section. Anyway, and then I put, oh boy, I'm not liking this at all. Tylee's backstory is dumb. What on earth is this episode? All subtlety went out the door. And then I wrote, why is Zuko's realization happening like this? That's all I wrote for this episode. So, I'm not kidding. Because my husband and I, when we were watching these episodes, stayed up kind of a little bit later, and then we went to go to sleep. And I could not sleep. I couldn't sleep because I kept just being like, what was that episode? And I feel so odd about it. So, feel free to let me know. Of course. I probably don't need to say this, but just be really mindful of the fact that I don't know what's happening next. So just, be really careful about how you say stuff. If you want to say something, but it requires that you allude to or talk about something that happens later, then feel free in a future season 3 video that I do to elaborate and be like, okay, this is what I wanted to say. You've gotten to this point, so now I can say it. So if you need to hold on to thoughts, that's completely fine. It's also completely fine if it feels like it's irrelevant to that episode later, that finally it gives you the chance to talk about something. But I just really, I don't want to be spoiled. So, all right. Now, going through the other episodes. And I said I wanted to go slightly out of order and talk about things as they related to previous seasons. And I want to talk about the Painted Lady. I know I'm jumping around a lot. I started with episode 5. Now I'm going to episode 3, a refresher, the Painted Lady. You have Katara seeing this place that is being harmed, this very small village is being harmed by the Fire Nation. What's new? And I do really appreciate that this show doesn't shy away from showing the way in which very powerful groups end up harming very usually small villages, small towns, rural areas. They either harm them through having work no longer really be available to them, or the environment in which they lived off of or lived in harmony with, or some degree of that, is now off balance because they are cutting down trees, which you saw in season 1, or in this case they're polluting the river, which is affecting this village's ability to get food, all these things. So I really appreciate the show has these things that, while in the context of the episode seem just like a minor thing, oh, this just affects this little town, but then yay, they save the day, but in actuality it's painting a picture of problems that exist everywhere, not just in this fantasy world, but in our own world as well. So I really appreciate that about this episode. I also didn't dislike the episode. I had a good time watching it. I also really, really loved when Katara pushes back against her brother, because there's a quote where he tells her that she needs to do nothing. Sometimes that is the best course of action, to do nothing. And then she says no. And the way she says no, it's very forceful and firm. And she is saying that she is never going to abandon people when she believes she can help them. And I really think this was a good moment for Katara, because we've seen her throughout the first couple of seasons. She does have this tendency to want to help, which is good. But I feel like she also is kind of trying to battle what she's supposed to do, what's the smart thing to do. She hears what other people tell her, and she's really coming into her own and asserting herself and what she believes in. So I really like all of that. The only reason this episode is kind of a weaker one for me is because it felt very much like a repeat of the episode we got in season 1, where we go to that smaller town that is Earth Nation, and obviously not Fire Nation, but it is a more rural area, and you see this small place affected by the actions of the Fire Nation. You have Katara recognizing, oh hey, something's wrong, I want to help. You have her brother who's basically like, no, we need to stick to a schedule, and she pushes back and says, no, I think we need to help. The difference is that in the Earth Nation episode, Sokka and Aang kind of help her come up with a solution, and in this episode, she starts to do something on her own. So she kind of decides, I'm going to sabotage our travels by making Appa appear sick, and then I'm going to go help people on my own. So that's, one minor difference, but then she decides to basically go incognito and help people. Before, she did it by deceiving the guards into believing she was using earthbending. Here, she is deceiving the villagers themselves into believing she is a spirit, but either way, she's relying on people thinking she's someone she's not. Then she helps them from the inside, and she even has almost exact dialogue about how she wants to help people help themselves. And she also, there's this kind of conclusion to the episode by destroying the Fire Nation, the thing that has oppressed these people. So in the other episode, it was the ships, and here it was the thing, what is it? It's a mine or like a factory, basically. I'm so sorry that I'm forgetting the exact specific thing. But we take that down, we destroy that, and it felt very similar. It felt like it wasn't just similar in some of its themes, or it wasn't just similar in its plot. It felt like the beats of the episodes were very similar as well. I think I had even said in the discussions about those episodes with the Earth Nation that it felt like it happened really fast and the pacing was a little funny. I didn't think the pacing was suffering at all in this episode. So in that sense, I feel like they took the beats of the previous episode that was like this and then they improved upon it, but they still were improving upon a thing that was already kind of there for them to use. So I don't know if it's just because I'm watching it all basically back to back and I'm also having the time to sit and talk about these things. Maybe I wouldn't have noticed as much had I not been doing that. But the reason that this frustrates me a little bit, despite the fact that I didn't dislike the episode, is just that this is the final season and I don't really want to spend time doing what feels like repeat episodes from previous seasons. I'm not saying we have to, every episode needs to push the plot forward. We can't have any character moments. I'm not saying any of that because if you know, especially from my book channel, I love just sitting with characters. I love when the plot doesn't move forward at all, but we're really sitting with characters, getting to know them, understanding them better. As they are being introspective, we are sitting there with them, thinking through things with them. I love that. So I'm not in opposition to having scenes or an entire episode dedicated to character development. It's just I feel like we kind of already did that. One thing though that I was a little confused by is I don't know why she didn't just tell Aang, because when Aang sees her and he's like, hello, wow, I don't usually see such pretty spirits, and just being just precious Aang, that she wasn't just like, Aang, it's me, it's Katara. I don't know why she didn't tell him once they were far enough away from her brother, because I feel like Aang has always shown himself to want to help. Aang rarely is like, I don't think I should intervene. That's not his character at all. He's pretty on board for most heroic deeds. So I kind of didn't know why there was such a need to have her run and then him just speedily being like, hey, hi, what's going on? So I have, I guess, conflicted feelings about this episode too. So we'll just go ahead and continue the sandwich that is my out of order thoughts. We did 5, then we did 3. Let's go to 4. So 4 is the episode where Sokka learns from this new master that he finds. He also gets one of those White Lotus pieces at the end of the episode, so I'm wondering if there's something going on with that. Iroh is still somehow getting information about the Avatar, perhaps. So I'll be curious to see where that leads. And this episode, I think, was necessary. It is not the most exciting or emotionally gutting of episodes. Not that every episode needs to be, though, because I was just talking about before, I do think it's important to have episodes from time to time where you can flesh out characters a little bit more. And I think it was a long time coming that we needed to find a moment for Sokka to sort of feel this sense of uselessness, even though he's not useless. But inevitably, how could you not when you see them doing these magnificent deeds using bending and you're just over there like, all right, I guess I'll just sit with Momo while you all do that. I think it was a necessary episode. I don't know that I have a whole lot of thoughts, though. I did find it funny that Sokka, through his different ways of thinking through things, proved himself to be worthy of tutelage, and that he definitely, in the long run, is going to be a very good swordsman and warrior. I do like that the show, it's not that Sokka's stupid. I mean, occasionally I might be like, Sokka's such a dummy. But it's not that he's dumb as in there's a lack of intelligence. It's just like, sometimes he's just such a goofball that you're like, oh. Like when we have the Tales of Ba Sing Se, and I think I said, like, of course Sokka's was dumb or something like that. But it was silly and fun and cute, and I like that they highlighted that those silly, fun, cute things about Sokka are really vital to the morale of the group, because him being gone for a day and Katara's trying to fill the role by making jokes, and Aang's like, I guess humor doesn't run in the family, and then Toph is just kind of like, I'm bored, and I really like that was highlighted, because it does matter. But I do want to highlight Sokka's, what I would consider, like, actual, you know, intelligence, and how his intelligence very much comes through being very innovative and thinking outside the box and being a little bit off the path in how he approaches problems. And the reason I think this is actually a really brilliant thing is because I think for a lot of people, when they go through school, there is sort of this, you are intelligent if you're good at these specific things in school, and oftentimes it's reduced to certain specific subjects. It's not all subjects, it's certain subjects. So math and science are usually the really big ones. And there are kids that are not inclined toward being really good at math and science, but they can be so brilliant and so skilled in other areas, but they won't think of themselves as smart, and society, it feels like, doesn't think of them as smart as well. And I've seen people who are amazing with math, and when it comes to common sense, they have none of it. So I think that this is a good thing to show that Sokka, him thinking a little bit differently, is still vital. You still have intelligence. And they really kind of hit it hard by having him be a complete kind of buffoon, it seems like, on surface level with his training, because he does everything so outside the box. I think a good example was when the teacher is telling him, oh, for your writing, you need to really make sure that you are present in it. And I think he just puts this stuff on his face and stamps his head on the piece of paper, and he's like, yeah, it's me. And it's kind of, I don't know if this ever happened when you were a kid, but I remember when I was really little, really little, that everybody in the class got handed a piece of paper, and then whoever the person was like, okay, now fold it in half. And then most kids would do it hamburger style, but there's the occasional kid that did it hot dog style. And then the teacher would be like, see, some people think differently, and that's good. And I remember as, like, the rule follower, I was like, well, I would have done that too. I didn't, you know, just a dumb, like, but now that I'm not being told I'm smart, now I'm upset kind of thing, that I feel like when you're little, the second one person gets told, like, good job, you're like, but me. So maybe that's kind of like Azula. I don't know. Am I like Azula? No, I don't want to be like Azula. I'm just saying, I really liked this episode highlighted Sokka's creativity and innovation and thinking outside the box. However, maybe not the most impactful of episodes, but I enjoyed it. Now for the first two episodes, which I thought were fantastic. I'm so sorry that this is so all over the place. Hopefully you don't really care. But The Awakening, the first and opening part of this whole section. This to me had what I kind of wanted from Zuko with his realization that he is mad at himself. I wanted the way in which the awakening was done to have that be done for Zuko, because in this episode, Aang just feels so restless. He hates that everybody's telling him, just stop, just relax. Everybody thinks you're dead, but that's a good thing, because now we can infiltrate, we can travel, we can go places, and nobody's going to know to look for you. We don't have to worry about being pursued anymore. And he is doing things that are detrimental to that plan. I mean, he's flying around on his glider. Also, him using the glider to basically sail and surf was really cool. But anyway, so he's doing things where you're like, Aang, stop. You're going against the plan. What are you doing? And he constantly is like, I have to. And he's willing to leave everyone, including Appa. He's willing to leave them all behind to go to the Fire Nation because he feels like, I have to do this. And then he finally admits, they think I abandoned them again. And I thought this was so well done because it's so well highlighting the struggle that he has had and this guilt that he has carried from the beginning. It's like this guilt has been alleviated at times. I think The Storm is a great episode that shows, okay, he's letting some of that go, but it lingered, and so to see that again. And I feel like there's some symbolism in that The Storm is an episode where it really is hitting the fact that how he got trapped in ice, and it kind of being a result of him being a little bit on the reckless side. and him trying to choose something for himself, how he now feels like, oh, I was selfish and then I got stuck and the world I wasn't here to help the world, and all these things that he's dealing with. I think that here you're seeing, while it's not necessarily the exact storm, it's still taking place in a very similar environment, a similar setting where it's literally him and these waves and kind of a storm, honestly, again. So I really liked this sort of parallel to that before. But I guess my point being, I think that was like symbolism done really well, and I think it was kind of alluding to what he had struggled with before and how it's still present, and it's things that you kind of pull from it, as opposed to him just telling you like, well, before I used to think this, and now instead of just telling me everything, there's just this one little line. It's sort of in isolation, and I think it's brilliant, and I really wanted that for episode 5 with Zuko and his realization. But anyway, I'll get off of that. We finally get to hear Zuko's father, Ozai, and Mark Hamill is the voice actor, I'm pretty sure. And I wrote in my notes, did Mark Hamill try to replicate some of Iroh's voice? Because obviously they're related, and it would make sense that they would maybe sound somewhat similar. So I felt like there was a hint of that. Like, Mark Hamill's very gifted when it comes to, he's done so much voice acting work, and also he shows up in everything. I don't know. I feel like there are times where I'm like, is that Mark Hamill? And it will be like, if you've ever seen the show What We Do in the Shadows, one of the best episodes, the human bartender episode, I'm like, what is Mark Hamill doing in this show, and why is he playing such a weird random character in the show? Anyway, so I think he's brilliant with his voice acting and just his acting in general. So it would make sense to me if he did, in a way, kind of pay respects to that voice actor and then try to emulate a little bit, so that it seems like there's more than just, we're Fire Nation and we're brothers and you know that because we told you, but that there's hints even in his voice. I could see that happening, but maybe, I don't know, maybe that's not a thing at all. And then Katara with her father. So I thought that, I think this was a really good thing to have in the show. And she's thinking that, I know it's irrational for me to be mad at you for leaving because you had to do what you had to do, but I can't help the fact that this is how I feel. I think that's a really healthy thing. It wasn't healthy when she was being really mean to him. But I do like that we hit that point, because I think that added a lot of depth to her character, her feeling this weight of having to be the parent for so long, and this sort of resentment, like she didn't get to be a kid as much. It was a little on the nose, and I did find the parallel. I've been highlighting throughout the entirety of watching this show the parallel paths that Aang and Zuko have been on, and I thought it was really interesting that Zuko is told, finally, you've redeemed yourself, son. So there's the idea of redemption, yet he's feeling so uneasy about where he stands morally. And then you have Aang saying, I need to redeem myself. I need my honor back. But interestingly, I think Zuko being told by someone else, not himself, not deciding what honor means to him, but being told by someone else, you've redeemed yourself, thus, the idea that he has his honor back. When it's given to him by someone else, he doesn't feel anything because it wasn't his decision. I really thought the Awakening episode was fantastic. I really liked this episode. I thought it was great. I wrote, where's Iroh? We're not going to talk about that. I need someone to just be like, Iroh, you're a lovely person, and here's a hug, and let's talk about your favorite tea, and let's get your tea shop back. When I don't know if I said this when talking about the Earth, the last batch of episodes from last season, because I was very consumed with the fact that Appa was so mistreated. But when Iroh went to go serve tea, and he's like, I for so long thought that I would see the king and it would be as enemies, but here I am coming today to serve him tea, and he's like all cute and precious. I'm like, no, don't take this away from us. And then they did, and I'm like, where is he? Anyway, episode 2, the headband. I really liked this episode. For one, I liked that Aang finally got to have a sliver of a childhood. I thought that was so sweet. Also, I know this is not important at all, but they all look so cool with their Fire Nation outfits, and I love Aang's little headband, and I think he looks so cute. I think he's adorable. And so I love him like getting to go to school and just through being like a cute, curious kid accidentally being out of line with how they are because they're so strict. I thought this episode was fantastic, not just for those things for Aang, but in showing the way in which the Fire Nation has had to instill basically propaganda into their students from the time that they're very young. Because in order to have this entire nation believe in what they're doing, which is wrong, they have to convince them from the time they're young. It's not just this thing that Zuko experiences because of his dad. It's something that everybody experiences, and being out of line it can be as simple as dancing, expressing joy when you're not supposed to. It seems like you're only supposed to have positive feelings, and any form of passion, it's only supposed to be when you're giving reverence to the Fire Nation. You're not allowed to show it and express it, it seems, in any other way. So Aang having this chance to get to show that joy and how there's nothing wrong with it to those other students. In fact, there's good in feeling that and expressing that. Him getting to show that with the other kids, I was like, I really like this episode because it also shows Aang's ability to bring people up and uplift people are not always dependent on his bending skills. So I really, really liked this moment for him. I liked that he got to have sort of this like confident moment too with his dancing and then dancing with Katara. And I was like, oh, yay. Because he's not just this kid stumbling about trying to save the world, which is basically an impossible task. He gets to just be good at something that is a little bit simpler. And I really liked this episode. I liked these first episodes so much. That's why I wanted to end with these two as opposed to the first ones because, well, not the first ones, episodes 3 through 5, which I talked about first. But I wanted to end on these because I thought these were brilliant. I thought that they paralleled things from before really well. And these make me excited for the rest of the season. And I wanted to end on that note rather than, what the heck was episode 5? And then like have this long thing about how I have conflicted feelings about it. But anyway, this is the most pulled apart I have felt when it comes to having really excited, happy feelings and then having very concerned feelings. If we get more episodes like The Awakening is the first one, and the other one is called The Headband. If we get more episodes like those two, then I can't wait. But if we get more episodes that are like, let me tell you exactly what I need you to get out of this moment, that's gonna frustrate me. So I hope we don't get too many more super on the nose, let's not worry about subtlety anymore moments. I don't want that. And I also don't want any more episodes that feel like a little bit a 2.0 version of previous episodes. I don't really want that as much because I've already seen that. We have a lot to do. There's a lot to uncover. There's a lot that needs to happen with the characters, with the plot, with the world and the setting. I don't know. But I felt kind of like that after the first 5 episodes of season 2, and then everything else from there was amazing. So I'm still, holding out that it's going to be amazing. But anyway, let me know what were your thoughts on these. Is the beach episode a fan favorite? Do people love it? Am I really outside here? Or is it something that it's kind of, I would be very curious to know. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.